She stood outside the supermarket barefoot, cradling a baby who wouldn't stop crying. Her other four kids clung to her skirt like shadows, silent, wide-eyed, and hungry. And then she whispered it. I haven't eaten in 2 days. They've had nothing but water. The man she spoke to, the one people crossed the street to avoid, slowly reached into his worn coat pocket, his fingers trembling, not from the cold, but from the storm inside him. He'd buried his wife 3 months ago, lost his job 2 weeks after. And until this moment, he believed no one in the world was worse off than him. But that night outside a dusty corner store, everything changed. Because what he discovered next would haunt him, heal him, and lead him to a truth he never saw coming. But before we jump back in, introduce yourself and let us know where you're tuning in from in the comments. Your stories matter here. And if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you never miss a single soul-stirring moment. Now let's go back to the beginning, before hunger met hope, before a broken man met a desperate mother, and before two shattered worlds collided on a cold Tuesday afternoon. Dust clung to everything in the town of Gracelake. The windowsills, the worn-out porch swings, the sidewalks cracked from summers too hot and winters too stubborn. It wasn't the kind of town you visited. You either were born here or you ended up here after losing something. For Maria, it was both. She came to Gracelake 5 years ago, dragging a suitcase with a broken wheel and a baby strapped to her chest. No husband by her side, no family, just that suitcase, that baby, and a tiredness behind her eyes that even sleep couldn't fix. People noticed her right away. How could they not? A young woman with 5 children in tow, each spaced a year apart. The children never smiled. They never made a scene, just looked at the ground and followed her like shadows. Silent, watchful, unsettling even. It didn't take long for the rumors to start. Did you see the scar on her neck? Looks like someone tried to... I heard she ran from something or someone. She doesn't talk much. Maybe she's slow. She walks funny. You think she's sick. It wasn't sickness, not the kind they meant anyway. Her limp was the ghost of a car crash from years ago, before the babies, before Gracelake, before she stopped believing in rescue. Her voice was soft, not from shyness, but from something deeper, a tiredness of explaining, defending, justifying her existence. The scar on her neck. She never talked about it, not even to the older ones. And the silence wasn't just outside of her, it was inside too, the kind that builds when no one calls you by your name anymore. When the only human contact you have is the brush of coins exchanged at the dollar store, or the apologetic smile from the librarian who sees you more than she should. They called her that woman with the kids, not Maria, never Maria. The children weren't in school, some blamed her, others whispered about the system failing them. The truth was simpler and sadder. She couldn't afford the paperwork, the supplies, the doctor's checkups. And she was scared someone would take them from her if they looked too close. Their small rental was falling apart, 2 bedrooms, 6 bodies, 1 broken water heater. She washed the clothes in a plastic bin out back and hung them on a line that sagged like her shoulders did when she thought no one was watching. The kids learned early how to stretch a can of beans into dinner, how to read books upside down, how to hold their breath when the landlord knocked. Sometimes Maria didn't eat. Sometimes she pretended she already had so the kids wouldn't feel guilty. There were days she stayed in bed too long, paralyzed by a sadness too heavy to name. On those days, the oldest girl, Mia, age 9, quietly took charge, toasted the bread, tied the shoes, wiped her baby brother's face with an old towel she dipped in warm water. Maria's world wasn't just poor, it was invisible. People passed her on the street and looked away. She'd become a fixture of the town's landscape, like the cracked fountain at the park or the rusted swings that no one used anymore. And maybe that's what hurt the most, not the hunger, not the judgment, not even the memories that clawed at her in the dark, but the fact that no one saw her. Not really. They saw a burden, a mess, a cautionary tale, but not a person, not a mother, not a woman who once laughed so hard her ribs hurt, who used to hum lullabies to her first child, even when her own stomach growled. They didn't see the way she tucked each child into bed with a whispered prayer, or how she sat on the floor every night, piecing together torn pages of old workbooks, trying to teach them something, anything that might give them a better life. They didn't see how she still remembered the smell of her husband's shirt, even though he'd been gone for over 5 years. Killed in a robbery gone wrong. She never told the kids that, just said daddy's with the stars now, and hoped they'd believe it a little longer. They didn't know that sometimes when the silence became too loud, she stood in the backyard at night and screamed into a pillow until her throat gave out and no one ever asked. Until one day, someone did, but we're not there yet. Before we dive deeper into Maria's story, just a quick note. I'm Thomas, the voice behind this narration. If you're still with me, and if this story's already tugging at your heart a little, let me know in the comments. I read every single one, and your thoughts mean more than you know. Now back to Maria. There was one place in Grace Lake where she felt a little less judged. It wasn't a shelter or a church. It was the back alley behind Rizzo's Market where they threw out produce too bruised to sell. She'd learned the schedule Mondays and Thursdays at 6 p.m. That's when she scavenged. Apples with soft spots, bananas already turning black, sometimes even sealed bread if she was lucky. She taught her kids how to look without touching too much, how to be quick, how to smile if someone caught them as if they were just playing. That's where she was on the day everything began to change. Behind Rizzo's, clutching a soft tomato like it was treasure when the baby started to cry again. Her arms were too tired to bounce him, her knees too sore to crouch. And for the first time in a long time, she felt it. Desperation, not the quiet, constant kind she carried every day like an extra limb, but loud, ugly, shaking hands kind of desperation. So she did something she never thought she'd do. She walked around to the front of the market, gathered her courage like broken glass in her palms, and stood outside, not begging, not at first just standing until one of the kids whispered, "Mama, I'm hungry." And then she did it. She looked at a stranger, a man stepping out of the store with his coat too big and his eyes too sad, and said, "Sir, do you have any food you could spare?" What she didn't know was that this man had just walked away from everything. His home, his church, the grave he visited every morning. And what he didn't know was that this wasn't just a moment of charity, it was the beginning of something neither of them saw coming. The wind picked up as she spoke, not strong, just enough to lift the ends of her hair and carry her voice a little further than she meant it to go. "Sir, do you have any food you could spare?" He stopped not because he wanted to, but because something in her voice pulled at him, something soft and desperate and barely stitched together. He looked at her face, not her clothes, not the way the baby was crying, or how the other kids clung to her legs, but her face. And for the first time in weeks, maybe months, he felt the air leave his lungs. Grief recognizes grief even when it's dressed in rags. He was tall, maybe in his late 40s, not old, not young. His coat was too big for him, the sleeves dragging past his wrists. His eyes were red-rimmed and tired, like he hadn't slept properly in a long time. And in his right hand, he carried a grocery bag. Nothing fancy, a loaf of bread, a can of soup, some crackers, and a single chocolate bar that had been an impulse buy at the register. He looked down at the bag, then back up at her. The kids avoided his eyes except the oldest, Mia, who stared at him with a kind of practiced suspicion. She didn't trust strangers. Maria had made sure of that. "I can share," he said quietly, holding out the bag. Maria hesitated. Her pride wrestled with her need, but the baby's crying tipped the scale. "Thank you," she whispered. She didn't take the whole bag, just the bread. She tore it in half and handed it to the two youngest first, then looked up again, as if to say, "You can go now." But he didn't. Instead, he knelt slowly, letting his knees find the sidewalk, and gently placed the rest of the food beside her. "Name's Samuel," he said after a moment. "You?" She hesitated again. "Maria." They didn't shake hands. Neither made a big deal of the names exchanged, but something shifted in the air between them. A recognition, a wordless understanding that didn't need to be spoken aloud. Maria didn't invite conversation. Samuel didn't push it. He sat beside the curb just far enough not to be threatening, close enough to be present. The baby finally stopped crying. "I lost my wife," he said after a long silence. Maria didn't respond, but her eyes flicked toward him. 3 months ago. Cancer. Quick aggressive." He paused. "She used to feed the strays behind our building. Said hungry mouths didn't deserve to be punished for living." Maria stared at her kids. "I used to give out food too. Before all this." He nodded. "Funny how the world flips." Another silence. Longer this time. But it wasn't uncomfortable. Sometimes the soul speaks in what it doesn't say. From across the street, a curtain shifted. Old Miss Tillman, who ran the consignment shop next to the barber, was watching. She always watched. She'd already told 3 people she thought Maria was a thief. Probably a drug user too, she'd said. No woman ends up with 5 kids and no man unless something shady's going on. Samuel saw the curtain shift, felt the town's gaze start to focus on him, the way it always had since Evelyn died. They didn't understand why he stopped going to church, why he quit the auto shop, why he walked aimlessly now, talking to no one, carrying groceries he didn't eat. They didn't know he'd tried to end things, twice. The only thing that stopped him the second time was a photograph. Evelyn holding their stillborn daughter smiling through tears. He saw that same kind of smile on Maria now, as she wiped a crumb from her toddler's cheek. Broken, brave, terrifyingly human. People here. Talk, Maria said finally. You should go before they start talking about you. Let him, he shrugged. She looked at him then, not a glance but a look. Full, direct. You don't scare easy. I've already been through the worst, he said. After that, what's left to be afraid of? She gave the smallest of smiles, just one corner of her mouth. You don't know what worse is yet, she said softly. He didn't argue. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the chocolate bar. Don't let the kids see, he whispered, handing it to her. Like a secret. She took it without thanks, only because she didn't have the words to match the moment. They sat a little longer. The wind stilled. The sun began to dip lower behind the buildings, casting long shadows across the sidewalk. Eventually he stood. Do you come here often, he asked. She nodded once. Mondays, Thursdays, after 6. He nodded too. Maybe. I'll see you again. And then he walked away. Didn't ask for anything. Didn't linger. Just disappeared around the corner like smoke. But Maria felt something shift in her chest. Hope was dangerous. She'd buried it years ago beside the man who never came back from work one night. But here it was. Barely a spark, but real. She looked down at her kids. They were licking crumbs from their fingers, looking more like children and less like ghosts. Maybe this was the beginning of something. Or maybe it was a fluke. Either way, she'd remember his name, Samuel. Across town, the rumors started before nightfall. Saw him sitting with her, talking, didn't even look ashamed. Must be sleeping, with her already disgusting 5 kids. Can you imagine? But some noticed something else. A light in Maria's eyes that hadn't been there before. And Samuel. He walked straighter that night. Didn't pass by the cemetery like he usually did. Didn't stop at the liquor store either. Instead, he went home and boiled the soup he'd meant to give her. Sat at the table, and for the first time in months, ate entalone, yes, but not hollow. It started with the coat, not the limp, not the silence, not the wandering the alley behind Rizzo's. No. What finally gave the town an excuse to act was the coat. It was Mia's. Too large, patched in 3 places, and too warm for a child with no money. That's what set off the whispers. Where'd she get it? Looks like one of the donations from the church. Wasn't there a bin missing last week? I bet she took it. The story grew like mold. Quiet, then everywhere. By Friday, people were crossing streets to avoid her. The library closed early when she approached. The diner owner who used to give her leftover toast suddenly stopped. Then came the worst of it. An officer at her door. Someone had filed a report. Theft, child neglect, vagrancy. They didn't arrest her. Not that night, but they made it clear. One more step out of line and the kids would be taken. Fostered. Given a chance at a real home, the officer had said without irony. Maria stood in the doorway long after they left, the kids watching her from behind. The couch silent. Her chest ached, but not from fear, from shame. It wasn't true. She hadn't taken anything. The coat had been left in a box by the community dumpster, clearly abandoned. But that didn't matter now. The town had decided. She was guilty, and that night when the baby cried and the formula ran out, and she had nothing left in the pantry but stale crackers and half a jar of peanut butter, Maria broke. Not loudly, not with screams or shattered plates. She simply picked up the baby, wrapped him in a scarf, and walked out the door. She didn't tell Mia where she was going, didn't pack anything, didn't even put on proper shoes. She just walked, past the corner store, past the church steps, past the old tree that always lost its leaves too early. The snow was just starting. Tiny flakes, the kind that don't seem like much until they begin to stick. She didn't feel the cold. Not really. The ache inside her had numbed her long before winter arrived. By the time she reached the edge of Grace Lake where the train tracks curved behind the woods and disappeared, her legs were shaking. She sat down in the tall frozen grass, holding the baby close. He whimpered once, then went quiet. And that scared her more than anything. Maybe this was it. Maybe the world had answered her silent question. Am I too broken to be fixed? She closed her eyes. The wind howled once, then stilled. Samuel found the note 3 hours later. It was scribbled in pencil on a torn cereal box. Left on the porch of a neighbor who had just once been kind. I'm sorry, I can't let them take my kids. I just needed air. Please tell them I love them. That neighbor called the police. The police called the shelter. The shelter called Samuel. No one remembered how they knew to call him. Maybe someone had seen them talking that day outside Rizzo's. Maybe fate remembered when people forgot. But within the hour, Samuel was out the door. He didn't drive. He didn't ask anyone for help. He just walked. He knew where she would be. Not exactly, but close enough. Grief leaves trails, and he had followed them before. Once to find his wife's scarf at the edge of the lake the week after she passed. He followed the footprints in the snow, faint but clear. Small prints, a dragging step, a place where someone had stopped and leaned against a tree. He found her an hour before dawn sitting under an iron rail bridge, the baby asleep on her chest, her head slumped forward like a statue carved in sorrow. He didn't call out, didn't shout her name. He just sat beside her and waited. Minutes passed. Then without turning, she whispered, I didn't want to die. I know, he said. I just didn't want to feel this way anymore. He nodded even though she couldn't see him. I felt that way too. The baby stirred. Maria adjusted him gently without looking at Samuel. I didn't steal that. Code, I believe you. They're going to take my babies. No, they're not. How do you know? Because I won't let them. She finally turned. Her eyes were hollow red rimmed, but not surprised. You don't owe me anything. I'm not here because I owe you, he said. I'm here because I see you. That did something. It cracked something open. Not enough for her to cry, not yet, but enough for her shoulders to lower just slightly. He took off his coat and placed it over her legs. She didn't resist. Then he handed her a thermos. Tea, still warm. You think this fixes anything? She said quietly. No, he replied, but it's a start. They sat in silence as the sky turned from black to bruised purple, then to pale gray. Morning light revealed the truth of things, the tear in her sleeve, the frost clinging to the hem of her jeans, the deep lines of exhaustion carved into her face. But it also revealed something else. A man kneeling beside a woman, not to rescue her, but to remind her she wasn't alone. When they finally stood, Maria's legs wobbled. Samuel offered his arm. She didn't take it, but she walked beside him, and that was enough. Back at the apartment, Mia flung open the door the second they arrived. Her face crumpled, tears relief questions. Maria knelt and pulled her into a hug that lasted nearly a minute. Then she looked at all 5 of her children alive, safe, scared, and said the 3 words she hadn't said in weeks. I'm still here. Samuel didn't move in. He didn't take over. He didn't play the hero. He simply came by the next morning with groceries the next day, with hand-me-down clothes the next week, with a contact at Legal Aid who specialized in protecting families like hers, and slowly, piece by piece, Maria's world began to rebuild. Not because a man saved her, but because someone finally chose to stand beside her and stay. Winter cracked, not like a branch or a bone, but like a dam. Quiet at first, then sudden and loud. By early March, the snow gave way to damp dirt and hopeful sprouts. The town shed its cold skin, and with it its interest in Maria. That was the nature of gossip. It burned hot and fast, then forgot what it was about. But Maria didn't forget. She still walked with a quiet edge, still flinched when a stranger raised their voice near her children. But there was a new undercurrent to her, stronger, steadier rooted. Samuel noticed. He never commented on it, never said, you seem better or you look stronger. But he brought wood to her doorstep without asking. He fixed the loose cabinet hinge she hadn't mentioned. He taught Mia how to check the oil in the borrowed pickup truck that barely ran. Together they began to build. Not just safety, but life. It started with a plot of land on the edge of town, old forgotten. a former horse ranch that had sat abandoned since the Johnsons moved away years ago. The barn sagged. The fences leaned. The house itself looked like it held its breath, unsure if it was still allowed to stand. But Maria saw it and said, "That could be something." Samuel looked at her, eyebrows raised. "You think so?" She nodded. "It just needs hands. And time. And stubbornness," he added, smiling. She returned the smile. "Real this time. Teeth and all. Good thing we've got plenty of that." So they cleared it. Samuel brought a borrowed chainsaw. Maria brought a rake. And 5 kids who thought a pile of broken fence posts was the most fun they'd had in months. Together they swept, sorted, salvaged. Day by day the place changed, not fast, not dramatically, but like healing. By the end of April, they had one working room inside the house, one safe stall in the barn, and a mailbox with their names stenciled, side by side, Rivera and Lowe. Not husband and wife, not quite partners, something in between. But it meant something, especially to the kids. Mia wrote her name with both last names on her notebooks now. The twins stopped asking when dinner was. They just trusted it would happen. Samuel stayed later each night. Sometimes they ate around the old table together. Other times he just sat near the fire pit and listened to the chaos through the open windows with a soft smile on his face. Maria didn't ask him to move in, and he didn't force it. They'd both known what it felt like to lose everything too fast. So, they took their time. Then came the letter, folded, creased, government stamped, delivered by hand from a sour-faced man in a pressed uniform who didn't like the look of the place or the woman who answered the door. It was from the state. Formal review of your case will be reopened due to new testimony concerning the well-being of your children. The words hit her like a slap. She barely noticed the second page. An anonymous community member had raised concern regarding the children's current living conditions with an unrelated male present. She knew exactly who had written it, Miss Tillman. She'd never let go of the idea that Maria was unfit, and now, her poison had found a channel. Maria didn't sleep that night. Neither did Samuel. He sat with her outside the barn while the wind howled through the broken slats. "She's trying to rip it all away," Maria whispered. "She won't," he said. "She might. I don't have a lease. I don't have a job. I barely have running water." What judge is going to ignore that he didn't respond right away? Instead, he looked at her. Really looked. The dark circles under her eyes. The way she held her own arms, like if she let go, she might fall apart. "I've been holding something back," he said finally. Maria tensed. "What, my wife?" he said. "Evelyn. She wasn't just sick. She was pregnant." Maria turned slowly. "She died before we could get help. I didn't move fast enough. I didn't believe the pain was that bad. By the time I did, until it was too late," he swallowed. "They blamed me. Her parents. Said I let her die. I started to believe them. That's why I stopped living." Maria didn't speak, not out of judgment, but because she knew what it was like to carry something so heavy it bent your spine to the ground. "I'm telling you now," he said, voice low, "because if we fight this, they're going to look at everything. My record, my grief, us." She nodded slowly, then said, "Good." He blinked. "Good. You think I want to fight this with a man who's never been broken?" Samuel exhaled, then laughed once, dry and bitter and relieved. "I'll stand with you," he said. "Not in front of me," she warned. He met her gaze. "Beside you, I promise." They got to work. Not with lawyers. They couldn't afford one yet, but with proof. Samuel registered the property legally in both their names. He filed for a land rehab grant. Maria started working part-time cleaning, stalls at the neighbor's ranch down the road, official income. They set up running water with a borrowed water tank, built a makeshift pantry, registered the kids in the nearby school district, documented everything. They weren't pretending to be perfect. They were trying, openly, honestly, visibly, and that mattered. When the social worker came, the kids spoke for themselves. "I eat every day now," the youngest boy said. "Mama don't. Cry as much," one twin added. "And we like Samuel," Mia said clearly. "He doesn't try to be our dad. He's just here." Maria stood in the doorway, fingers clenched behind her back, watching the social worker scribble, nod, ask. At the end, the woman simply smiled. "You're not what I expected," she said. Maria raised an eyebrow. That a good thing? The woman shrugged. It is today. That night around the fire pit, Samuel sat with the baby in his lap. Maria stood behind him, hair loose, expression soft. Do you still think about her? She asked quietly. He didn't pretend not to understand. Every day he said. She nodded. That won't change if you stay here. I don't want it to. She stepped around the fire and sat beside him. Their hands touched lightly. I still see him too, she admitted. The kid's father. He used to call me Sunshine, before he disappeared. Samuel looked at her. Do you hate him? She was quiet for a long time. No, she said finally. I think I just stopped needing him to come back. He nodded. The flames flickered between them. A silence passed. Long but not empty. Then Samuel turned, hesitated, and kissed her. Not like a claim, not like salvation, just like someone choosing someone else, on purpose. Maria didn't cry, but when she kissed him back, her fingers trembled, and across town, in the dim yellow light of her parlor, Miss Tillman watched her tea grow cold. Her report had failed. The town had lost interest. Her mouth curled bitterly as she heard laughter from her open window. Faint, distant, from the edge of town, where the unwanted had built something no rumor could burn down. The town fair arrived, earlier than usual that spring. Bright tents, loud music, popcorn in the air, and judgment still tucked in certain glances. Maria hadn't planned to go, not because she feared them anymore, but because some wounds don't crave exposure. But the kids begged. Mia had been practicing a song with the school choir. The twins were promised rides, and the baby, though, still tiny, lit up at the sound of music now. So she went. Samuel offered to drive. When they arrived, the eyes came, some wide, others narrow, some laced with surprise, others with that same quiet disapproval that had followed her like a second shadow. She held her head high. Samuel kept pace beside her. He never touched her in public. Not yet. They hadn't made anything official, hadn't labeled this strange, beautiful bond between them. It was still forming, but he was there, always there, until he wasn't. She lost him near the ring toss, turned around, and he was gone. At first she thought nothing of it. He probably followed one of the kids, maybe ran into someone. Then she saw the crowd gathering by the stage, and his voice rose above them all, not shouting, just speaking, clear, strong, unshaking. My name is Samuel Lowe, he said, standing on the small stage that had once held pancake-eating contests and square dancers. I've lived in this town most of my life, lost everything in it too, scanned the crowd, faces he knew, faces that had forgotten him, and one face near the back that held still a stone. But something happened this year. Someone showed me what it looks like to lose everything and still choose to love. Not loudly, just fiercely, he glanced toward Maria. And I'm done pretending I haven't found something worth standing beside, worth building for, worth fighting with, Gasp murmured. Someone coughed. A woman whispered, Is he talking about her? Samuel smiled soft and certain. She is not what you say she is. She is not a rumor or a file or a scar. She is the reason I remembered what life feels like. And I will not spend one more day letting this town shame what should be celebrated. He paused, then added, So, if you're wondering whether I've chosen her, you're late. I already did. Maria didn't cry. Not yet. She simply turned and walked away. Past the booth with honey sticks, past the whispering mouths, past the popcorn and prizes and confetti. Samuel followed her moments later, breath unsteady, hope clinging to him like sweat. She was waiting by the back gate. You didn't have to do that, she said. I wanted to. Now they'll talk. Let them. She looked at him then, something fragile and fierce flickering in her eyes. Do you mean it? He didn't ask what she meant. He just nodded. And then she did something neither of them expected. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a tiny folded piece of paper, and handed it to him. He opened it. Inside was a name, a contact, a new mailing address. What's this? He asked. Maria looked up at him. If we're really going to build a life, it should be ours. Not a compromise, not a defiance. Not something that survives in the cracks of this town. You want to leave, he asked gently. I want to choose. Not react, not survive. Choose. She took his hand, placed it over her heart. I choose me, and I'm inviting you to come along. Samuel stared at her for a moment, then smiled full and unguarded. I'll follow you anywhere, he said. They didn't pack much, just what fit in the truck. The rest they gave away or left behind. Memories folded in corners, ghosts buried beneath floorboards. On their last night in town, they camped in the half-built barn now adorned with fairy lights and wool blankets. The kids. Since Samuel played guitar, Maria watched them all, like someone waking from a long, hard dream. And when the baby gurgled, Mia looked up and said, We should name him after someone. Maria raised an eyebrow. He has a name. I mean his middle name. Samuel turned toward them, quiet, and Maria nodded. Eli, she said softly. We'll give him the name Eli. Samuel's eyes filled, but he didn't cry. He just leaned over and kissed the baby's forehead. Thank you, he whispered. They left at sunrise. No parade. No farewell. Just 5 kids in the back of a truck, a woman with the windows down and a man holding her hand as the town faded in the rear view. At the edge of the last turn, they pulled over for a moment. Snow had started again. Late, soft, glittering. Samuel reached out his hand. Palm up. Maria placed hers in it. And together in the falling hush of spring snow they held on. Not because they needed saving, but because they had finally chosen each other. Fully, freely, completely. If you're a returning viewer, we'd love to hear from you. Just type yes in the comments so we can get a sense of how many of you keep coming back. Your support truly means the world to us.